Hey guys, we are here at the Heartland Institute's conference in Orlando, and I am with Professor Howard Hayden. He's a Professor Emeritus of Physics at University of Connecticut. He also edits the Energy Advocate. Professor, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
You just got off the stage. You were talking about the contradictions of the IPCC, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They produce what's supposedly the Bible of climate science. What kind of contradictions have you found there?
Well, the main contradiction has to do with the difference between the amount of additional radiation that is emitted by the surface and the amount of radiation blockage that can be done by what they call their radiative forcing. And in all cases, they predict temperatures that are too high. They produce too much more radiation than can be accounted for by their greenhouse gases. It's simply, they just propose things that are physically impossible. And all they have to do is to apply the Stefan-Boltzmann radiation law that has been with us since about 1860 to their predicted temperature results, and they don't do it.
Why don't they do it?
I give up. Why?
Interesting.
Perhaps it's oversight. Perhaps it's they don't want to contradict their political bosses because there's big money involved. I don't know. I mean, make up your own rules. I'm not a mind reader.
So, there are a lot of scientists who are retired, like yourself, who are no longer teaching, no longer dependent on, university or grant funding, who are speaking out. But among those who are in university still, there seems to be very few scientists who will publicly talk about these issues that people like yourself are raising. What do you suppose is going on?
Well, I don't really know, but one thing I have noticed is an over-reliance on people who are allegedly experts. In other words, if somebody has some kind of theory about biology or something like that, I'm not going to contradict him because I'm not an expert in biology. And so if somebody is an expert in, let's say, nuclear physics, is he going to contradict somebody who is an expert in climate science? It's very often that sort of thing. Sort of a, let's just call it a respect for people who are in fields other than your own. And, it's not necessarily malicious or anything like that. It's just kind of what people do.
So, from a broader perspective, the whole hypothesis and the conclusions of the UN IPCC that it's almost certain that the warming is caused by human activity, that CO2 emissions are the primary driver of this. What do you think about that? Is that correct? Are human emissions of CO2 leading us toward a climate crisis that should be solved with these kinds of intergovernmental mechanisms they're proposing?
No. Now let me explain. If we take the standard thing that the IPCC likes to calculate is what would happen to the temperature if the CO2 rises to twice its present value. And if the CO2 rises to its present value, and I use the IPCC numbers, that would increase the ability of the atmosphere to retain an additional 3.7 watts per square meter from going into space. However, the temperature that they predict for that is around 3 degrees, or between 2 and 5, but we'll just take their 3. That 3 would cause the surface to increase its radiation by 16.7 watts per square meter, which is far in excess of what the CO2 is able to retain. And they just do not apply the Stefan-Boltzmann law to their results.
So in the summary for policymakers, which is used, of course, by policymakers all over the world, they've argued that it's practically a sure thing that CO2 is driving this, and that to fix it, we're going to need massive changes in the economy. I just got back from Egypt a couple months ago. They agreed in their final document that we needed a total restructuring of the planet's energy systems. Now, you work now in this energy field. You edit the Energy Advocate. What are your thoughts on this proposed restructuring of the global energy infrastructure? Does that make sense?
Well, no, you're trying to reorient the entire world to solve a non-existent problem. Why do that kind of malice to humanity in order to solve a problem that does not exist?
Well, I mean, billions, maybe trillions of dollars now are being spent on this, and you're saying the problem doesn't exist. How do we bring humanity back to its senses if that's the case?
It's hard to say. I don't really know. But there's the scientists have the smallest say in this, and the politicians have a heck of a lot more. And I think it's really the press that's got to be changed. After all, the politicians live at the behest of the press. They're held at ransom. The only thing I can say with certain is that the physics that the IPCC is doing is self-contradictory. And that should be enough. It should satisfy scientists. But how do you get through to politicians? How do you get through to press? You look at the expression climate crisis comes up hundreds of millions of times. And climate catastrophe, these words, these expressions get around, and they're just spread around like, who knows? It's just horrid what happens.
Yep. At the last UN conference I went to, we're headed to climate hell, is what the head of the UN and Joe Biden both said. Professor, before we let you go, how do people follow your publication, The Energy Advocate? What's the best place to find it, and how do people sign up if they would like?
Well, I have a website that I don't do much with, but it's a way of communicating with me called theenergyadvocate.com. I have a few books that are for sale there, but you can also just subscribe, and you can pay for it in PayPal or send a check, or send me email at Cork Hayden, CorkHayden at Comcast.net, and they can get a hold of me there.
Wonderful. Professor Howard, Cork, Hayden, really appreciate your time. Thanks for what you're doing.
You're very welcome.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence proclaims God-given rights, and we intend to protect them. Working with people like you for over 50 years, preserving freedom and building a better tomorrow. Safeguarding the Constitution by limiting government power. We are restoring liberties, educating voters, and leading the freedom movement. Join with us. United, we will defend our rights. We are all Americans. We are the John Birch Society.